Uh-huh.
Hi.
Boom!
Oh, jeez. Take the wheel. Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if it is your first time here. We are back today with episode 2 of Between the Covers. Thank you to everyone who watched the first episode, who commented, who sent us messages saying that they really enjoyed it. We really enjoyed making it.
We did.
Just having the opportunity to have some bookish chat. So yeah, as February is the month of love, I thought that for this episode we could talk all about love. More specifically, because neither of us are big on romance, more specifically we thought that we could talk about books and authors that we love.
Yeah. Because
quite frankly, I don't think that James could cope for much longer if we didn't give him an opportunity to talk to us all about about Brandon Sanderson. So that's what we're going to do for this episode. Sound good?
Yes, sounds really good. First of all, Jess, why don't you tell us what you're reading at the moment?
So I have literally today started reading Dragonfly by Leigh Bardugo. I say started reading, I have read approximately 2 pages, which is actually the list of characters, so haven't actually physically started, but this is what I will be reading next. This is World War II historical fiction, and it is about 5 Americans who are from all different walks of life who are recruited to become spies in France, and their project, or their code name, is that what you call it, is Dragonfly, but one of them ends up being killed. I think possibly their cover is blown, and so it's like looking at what is happening behind enemy lines. So yeah, did I say it was my book club book? I can't remember if I said it was my book club book, but it is. So I'm going to be reading this, and I think that it sounds like a very interesting concept. I read a lot of World War II historical fiction, but this I think sounds a little bit different, so very intrigued.
Yeah, hopefully it'll have loads of twists and turns. And
I think so. It's almost like historical fiction, but maybe with a little bit of a thriller-esque twist in it as well, like what's gone on, how's someone's cover been blown, and etc, etc. So yeah, very much looking forward to that. Hopefully by the end of the day I'll be more than 2 pages in. Yeah, what about you? What are you reading at the moment?
Okay.
I know what you're reading at the moment. I know where this conversation is going to go, but
so I am reading The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. Last month, or last video, we talked about reading this together as like a buddy read, because the concept sounded really interesting. It's about a girl who makes a deal with some kind of god or force or higher power about not being remembered, or not being able to be kind of, I'm really lost for words, it's quite difficult to explain actually. She goes through life without being remembered, without being really seen by anyone.
Does she have eternal life on the basis that no one will remember her?
Yes.
That's the...
Yeah, so she basically is in a sticky situation that she wants to get out of. She makes a deal. She doesn't really think about the full kind of consequences of that deal.
Right.
But basically she is, she can't get to know anyone. As soon as anyone leaves the room, they forget about her.
Right,
they forget about her existence. Her mother and father don't know her, and she is living forever until she decides that she's had enough, and then she gives her soul to this being, right?
And are you enjoying it, James?
So far, I am not enjoying it, no. Like I said, I thought the concept sounded really interesting.
Yes, yeah, I think it does.
But instead of being really fantastical and really intriguing, it's just reading it a lot more like a rom-com, like a Matthew McConaughey film.
Which what did you just call him? Matthew McConaughey?
Yeah, McConaughey. Matty McGeegy.
Do you think that, well, I know the answer, but do you think that the reason that you're not enjoying it is because the V.E. Schwab that you read previously, the Dark Shade of Magic series, I'm not sure if that's what it's called, but the Red London series was very much fantasy based, and this is a totally different, or I haven't read it yet so I don't know, but it sounds like it's even perhaps a different genre, a different story concept. Like the whole thing sounds very different from and you've gone into it thinking, oh, I really enjoyed A Dark Shade of Magic, therefore I will like this, and it's not.
I think that's fair. Also, there has been really no plot to date. So I'm very plot driven. I think we discussed that last time. And we've had some backstory about what happened in the past, but there's been no plot. Nothing has happened. I'm 2/3 of the way through, and I don't want to give it away too much. I don't want to do any spoilers.
No, and I think that because I'm going to read it, we can have a more in-depth discussion. And actually, I think that it's probably something that I'm really going to like if there's no plot, because it's about the characters.
Yes.
That's like.
Also, I think one of the characters is a bit whiny and moany, and I don't like them.
Angsty. Yes. Don't do angst. I'm too old for angst, frankly. So, not loving that.
No.
What are you listening to?
Well, I have just finished listening to A Rage of Dragons, the first and the second book, which people may not have heard of, but...
Is it fantasy?
It is fantasy. It was recommended to you, wasn't it? Because of...
It's written by an author of colour.
Yes.
And I saw it. You mentioned that you were listening to it. Very weirdly. You mentioned that you were listening to it, and then I saw it on someone's Instagram story. I'm sorry that I cannot remember who it was. Talking about authors of colour and fantasy books. And I was like, that's what you're listening to. But the two things were quite separate, but it wasn't something that I'd...
No.
Until I saw it on that story and you mentioned it. Totally not on my radar at all.
So I didn't realise that when I started listening to it. I just went onto Goodreads, found one of the last books that I read, The Faithful and the Fallen, and looked for like other recommendations around it.
Right.
Went onto it. It had a couple of good reviews, so I started listening to it. I think it was actually self-published to begin with.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and then it's been picked up, and there's another. I've read the first two. There's another two yet to come out.
It's fantasy. Give us a very brief synopsis of what it is about.
Okay, so it is fantasy, high fantasy, based in some world that I can't remember the name of. But it's African inspired, African themed. Okay. So a lot of the names evoke that kind of African culture. Although it is fantasy, it is made up. There are a race of people who have been evicted from their homeland because of a war that happened centuries ago, quite recent in fantasy terms, like 200 years ago. Okay. And then they are living on a new peninsula and basically have been at war with the current, the original occupiers of that peninsula for the last 200 years.
So what makes it fantasy? Is there magic?
Yes. There is magic. There are people who can enter the underworld and they can call dragons. And the dragons can fight for them, and it's quite a complicated magic system which you do get into. It's not quite as many rules as a Brandon Sanderson, but it is quite good. It's a very original concept, and but the main character who we follow, he's from the people who've invaded this peninsula.
Right. Okay.
And basically everything in his life just turns bad within the first like quarter of the book. Just everything goes wrong for him, and he sets out on this mission of vengeance to be the best swordsman warrior that there ever was, so that he can kill everyone who's ever wronged him.
Wow. Okay.
Basically,
it sounds a bit dark.
Yeah, it is very, very dark.
Right. Okay.
It really is dark. He's a really complex character. And a lot of stuff happens to him, and he just gets, it's like putting him in a washing machine and seeing him tumble around, like
Very good.
But he does grow as the story progresses, and I think we're moving on to the part now where it's less about his revenge and more about saving the world, which
It sounds good.
yeah, it is good.
I will find the author and the series, and I will link it in the description bar down below, so you can go and look at it.
Wait, I'm sorry for waffling on.
It's fine. That's very interesting.
It is really interesting. It's very good. I recommend it. And the guy who does the audio book, he's got a great voice. I could listen to it all day long. He's really, really, really just speaks to my soul. Shall we talk about authors that we love?
Yes, books and authors that we love.
Okay. Jess, would you like to go first, my dear?
I can go first, but I was going to cheat because I thought that we could talk about like our favourite author, an author that we absolutely love, that we would always buy the books, want to read everything, but I cannot narrow it down to just one author. There are a number of authors who I would consider favourite authors, or to buy authors. I want to know what they're writing, I want to know what they are releasing, I want to read it. Kate Morton, Connie Golden, Leigh Bardugo, Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Hobb,
Jodi Picoult. That's probably it. So 5 or 6 that, and I think that I could probably get away with it because they're all slightly different, different genres, writing slightly different things. But yeah, they are. If I was to realise that they were releasing a book, I would be so excited about it. So it's very difficult for me to narrow it. I couldn't possibly give you like my all-time favourite book. I would find that really difficult. There are several authors that I love. There are several authors that I really enjoy. I think I can't do it. I like them all for different reasons. I'm trying in my head to think about who is your absolute favourite.
Alright, can I ask a question?
You can.
Yeah, alright, was there a book that you read in the past that was like a complete eye-opener, that you never knew a story could do this or anything like that? Is there something that may not have been the best ever but has, you know, changed your opinion on something? Or
well, there are many books. There are many books like that. There are certain books that I've read that resonate with me. Robin Hobb, Assassin's Apprentice. I had never read a fantasy book like that. I didn't know that fantasy books like that existed. I have real ingrained nostalgic memories of reading that, and I think to do with, I've talked a little bit about this on the channel before, so apologies if it's a repetition, but the time that I read it, so our daughter Meg had just been born, so that was 12 years ago. And I have just real distinct memories of sitting in the rocking chair in her nursery while she slept reading Robin Hobb, and it's quite an emotive book anyway, isn't it? Like the journey that Fitz, our protagonist, goes on, gives you some feels, and he doesn't get it right, and it's a little bit of an emotional journey, but I have such distinct memories of sitting and reading it while she slept and just thinking to myself, oh my goodness me, like I just didn't know that books like this existed, and that they were just out there, we could just read them. Like that was a mind-blowing thing. But equally, the likes of Jodi Picoult, I've read a number of her books, and she very much looks at grey areas. So situations where if you heard about it or read about it in the news, you'd be like, oh, my opinion is 100% this, and she really challenges that and makes you look at and think about, yeah, but what about this, and what about this, and I really like that. So a number of her books have done that for me. It's really difficult, like Connie Golden, the way that he explores really well-known figures from history, but he deconstructs the things that we've been told, and gives you a new frame to look at it. Like there's just this, I just can't can't. It's like asking me to choose a favourite child. I literally can't.
Oh, I know mine.
I like them all. Probably if you push me, I would say Leigh
McGlynn. Oh.
No. If you're watching this, children, it is not true. We do not have favourite children. I no longer have a favourite husband. Let me just say that. Probably Leigh Bardugo, as in every time I see that she's written something, I get really excited about what it could be that she's written and released. Yeah, I spent a long time sitting and trying to whittle down my list, and I was like, I just can't. I like them all for very different reasons, and I like the experience that I get from reading what they're writing. I get very excited when I see that they've written something new. So anyway, I've talked about mine. We all know what we're here for, don't we? I know that Brandon Sanderson is your all-time favourite of favourites. Yeah, do you want to talk about why?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I said in the very first episode. One of the questions that I get asked a lot is what you're reading, why you're reading it, who you'd recommend. And I think 90% of the time it will be Brandon Sanderson. And I think one of the things that I'll say before I let you talk is, one of the things I like is he has a number of different series that are appropriate for a number of different readers. So if you are new to fantasy, for example, his Mistborn trilogy I think is very accessible.
Yes.
And then you have the total other end of the spectrum, which is his Way of Kings series, which is extremely high fantasy. And it's not that Mistborn is not complex or clever, because it is, but I think the way that he writes is just a very accessible style, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I'm not into high fantasy, I get bored. I will not read although I like Brandon Sanderson, I will not read Way of Kings because it just seems...
Well, you will eventually.
When it's all been released. Maybe. But yeah, unless I'm wrong, unless Brandon Sanderson is not your favourite author, but...
No, he is, yeah.
Succinctly, James, tell us why you love Brandon Sanderson.
So, first of all, I'll talk about him as an author before I go into the books, because I think that one of the best things about him is he's open and honest about his projects, what he's working on, his communication, and the effort that he puts into interacting with fans is just really, really good. So a lot of comparisons are made between him and George R.R. Martin for obvious reasons, but Brandon, he churns out books at such an impressive rate, and I think that's one of the best things about him, is that there's just always so much to read. And as you were saying, he hits all different points of experience. He branches out into, you know, graphic novels and stuff like that. He's got novellas, short stories. His main works are split into two categories. There's Cosmere and non-Cosmere, and to just explain that a little bit, Cosmere is this universe that he's created, and it's an interconnected universe, so kind of like Marvel's universe, where there are many different installments, and they're all set in the same universe. They all use the same underlying magic system, but the way those magic systems are represented on the different planets in the world is vastly different. He's had this mapped out in some form or another since he was like a kid. He's put so much thought and effort into it. It's unreal. And when you're reading the books, so the Mistborn books are part of the Cosmere. The Way of Kings of Stormlight books are part of the Cosmere. Many of his standalones, like Elantris, they're part of the Cosmere, and what you get is you get characters popping up in other books, and you get these little Easter eggs, and they've thus far been really quite subtle, but the last book, Rhythm of War, there was so much like Cosmere and interrelated content in there. Like every it was really good. It was really interesting.
So what is it about him then that makes him stand out? Because obviously you have, and you mentioned this in the last video, Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time. There are many epic fantasy authors. J.R. Tolkien, like he created a whole universe. Robin Hobb's Realm of the Elderling. What is it about Brandon Sanderson that at its core is why you're like, yes?
Okay, so it's not just a planet. Like Robin Hobb, that's a world. This is a universe.
Okay.
Which the scope of it is like it's not completely unique. I only know that because I've watched podcasts that explain how it's not completely unique. I personally haven't read anything of that scope before, but the scope is just mind blowing. That obviously would be worth nothing if the stories were rubbish.
Yeah.
But his stories are just really, really good. His characters are well developed. In The Way of Kings, he's really dived deep into some of the aspects of mental health that are affecting these characters. You know, one of the main characters has clearly got PTSD, and he explores how that plays out. But the best thing that he does is he writes these showpiece finales where he pulls threads from all parts of the previous books in that series I'm talking about. He pulls all these threads together and he has them all come together in these masterful showpiece finales, and honestly sometimes it's like the last quarter of the book, and I think one of the best ones was Oathbringer, which is the third Stormlight book that I've read, and honestly I can't describe it because there's so many words that goes into those books. He's had so much time to develop those characters and develop that storyline that when he brings it all together, it is just amazing. And no one writes a finale like Brandon. No one. And you know that yourself from Mistborn. That third book in Mistborn, which I actually don't think was my favourite Mistborn book.
No, and I often hear from people who say, oh, I read the first one and really liked it, and then I read the second one and I was like,
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, but you have to get to the end of the third one.
Yeah.
When you get to the end of the third one and he does his big reveal and he brings everything together, your mind is literally blown, right? You're like,
Yeah.
okay, so I missed so much stuff. When like he foreshadows a lot of stuff and you just take it for granted, you just read it and you're like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And then when all the pieces fall into place, it's like jaw dropping.
Yeah.
I say that to anyone who says to me, oh, I kind of liked it, but I'm like, you've got to read to the end because so much makes sense once you get to that final. Yes, yeah, he is. And like I say, I think one of the things that stands out is that his writing is very accessible.
Yes.
He knows how to tell a good story in a way that's not highbrow or convoluted or overly descriptive or anything like that. You can just pick it up and just fall straight into the story, can't you? And he tells a story and he creates his characters. He's very good at bridging the gap between plot and characters.
Yeah.
A lot of the time it's like one or the other. It's a very plot driven novel or it's a very character driven novel or series or what have you, but he does a good job of continually moving you forward in a plot, but with really well developed characters as well, I think. And like you say, you get the best of both of Brandon.
No, he's just prolific. Prolific writer, and everything. He's just getting better and better and better. And
can we talk about when we went to Paris and we were literally we were literally moments from meeting him.
Don't even.
In Shakespeare and Co.
Yeah.
Do you recall?
I do recall.
Getting back to the hotel, we'd been in the very famous Parisian bookshop, Shakespeare and Co.
Yeah.
And then we got back to our hotel and James was on Instagram. And he said to me, oh my word, Brandon Sanderson was also today in Shakespeare & Co. signing books.
Yeah.
And how he could have even been in there and we just didn't even notice.
So, well, I think he'd just gone in. He wasn't doing a book signing. He'd just gone in there. And what he'd done, he pulled all the Brandon Sanderson books off the shelf that were in there, signed them, and put them back in. And I didn't know. And I thought about buying like a souvenir Brandon Sanderson book from that bookshop, and I didn't do it because they didn't have any that I didn't already have.
Gutted.
And if I'd have just pulled one off, it would have been one that he'd signed that very morning.
That very day.
I was just like, ah. And we tried, didn't we, to get back the next day, but it was the Tour de France that weekend, and you just couldn't get around Paris.
No.
And we were on such a tight time scale as well because we were going to Disneyland. But
what are the chances an American author, your favourite author, an American author would be in the same foreign city, overseas city at the same, like, honestly, mind blowing.
Probably missed him by a couple of hours.
If that, he could have been literally there. I mean, the shop was packed. You couldn't move.
No.
Oh, do you remember that when you could go to places, and stand shoulder to shoulder with other people? Crazy, right?
Yeah, I know. Those were the good old days.
They were the good old days when you could travel and stuff. But yeah, so there you go. Anything else?
It was heartbreaking.
Anything else that you would like to add about
Brandon?
About Brandon.
Yeah, I will just say, I don't want to put anyone off. You know, I'm mentioning about all these Easter eggs and always bringing these people from different books. He very much sets out to make sure that each book works on its own as a standalone. No, people shouldn't get put off or intimidated by the fact that they don't know all this information and backstory.
Well, yeah, I've read a number of his books and haven't read the Stormlight Archives.
Yeah.
I understand very little about the Cosmere. I haven't researched it, and I have not struggled to grasp or understand his books. Probably knowing it would give you a more rich reading experience, maybe, if you're into that, but like you said, I don't think you need, it's not like I need to know in order to then read and enjoy
not
the
at all.
books. Yeah.
And the only reason I picked up on a lot of these is by watching podcasts or reading them. Listening to podcasts. Well, actually, I watch the podcasts on YouTube.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah. It's just them sitting there talking like this.
Oh. We're on trend.
Listening to podcasts or reading the wiki. A lot of it goes over my head when I'm reading the books. But yeah, they're the only books really that I've reread as well. I tend not to reread. I don't like rereading books. I don't like rewatching films either.
So if someone wanted to start, they were like, Brandon's written all these books.
Yeah.
I want to start somewhere. Where would you suggest that they start?
Well, Jess, that really depends on how experienced they are in reading fantasy.
Well, unpack it for us, James.
And how much interest they have in getting into fantasy. I would say that the Mistborns are, and I think that's, if you go onto Brandon's website, it does have suggested reading orders for these things. But if you want to get into fantasy and you're not really that versed in fantasy, then Mistborn is probably one of the best ways to get into it, because I mean, the first book's written even more like a heist, isn't it?
Yeah.
That happens in a fantasy world. That will lead on to other books and other series if that takes your fancy. I didn't particularly enjoy Elantris. I wouldn't start with Elantris. It was one of the first books he wrote, I think. But Stormbreaker was a really good one. As a standalone as well. So if you don't fancy reading a 3-book series, then
otherwise known as a trilogy.
Yeah. Other book series have, you know. Anyway.
Okay, so Mistborn or Stormbreaker.
I think it's called Stormbreaker or Warbreaker.
Warbreaker with the two sisters.
Yes, yeah. Warbreaker.
We do know what we're talking about.
Warbreaker is a standalone It's almost a prequel to Way of Kings. It's not a prequel to Way of Kings, but some of the characters do pop up.
I hope that this makes sense to everybody. Like, it's this, but it's not this, but it's this, but it's not this. Okay.
You don't have to have read it to understand and enjoy Way of Kings,
okay,
or the Stormlight Archive, but if you have read it, then there are things in the Stormlight Archive that you will understand more because you've read it.
Okay. Clear as mud.
Should I stop talking now? Or there's the Skyward series, but I haven't read them, so you should.
And that's not a finished
no
series either, and that's YA, and that's totally different. That's about space. It's about the last of humanity, living on a planet, being constantly attacked and having to live underground. And I've only read the first book. I own the second one. I've only read the first one, so yeah, that's totally different. And this video will be far too long if we go and explore that. Maybe we need to just do like a whole dedicated Brandon Sanderson.
I really
video.
feel like that's just what we've done. Like, no one needs to.
Many.
If you type Brandon Sanderson into YouTube, then
there's lots.
There's lots there.
Okay, so I think that we have covered that topic sufficiently. I feel like this video is going to be really long, but as we mentioned before, we did ask for questions, so in as succinct a manner as possible, we will try and answer this week's question, which I picked because I thought that it kind of fit with the whole theme of love and marriage and us together. But the question was, do you and James have similar personalities? And I'm going to hand over to you because I'm interested to see what you're going to say.
Well, I mean, no is the short answer. Jess and I are almost complete opposite personalities.
In everything. I think we have a very similar sense of humour.
Yes, we do.
And that's probably it.
No, I mean, we're both very stubborn.
Oh yeah, that's true. We have the best qualities that are the same.
It is I think it's one of our greatest strengths, but also probably one of our biggest weaknesses, isn't it? That we are so different. I think it leads to very interesting kind of dynamics between us. Something we've had to get to grips with living with each other for the last 13 years? 14 years. I'm very laid back. I'm an outgoing person. I am an extrovert. I am disorganized. I am messy. With the flow, to see how things go, and that's me really. Jess, on the other hand, do you want me to describe you, or
go for it.
Okay.
I'm interested.
Jess is probably one of the best people I've ever known. Jess is very organised. She's very loyal. She's very single-minded. She's very driven, and very much always looking for the next thing. What's the next project? What's the next goal? What are we going to achieve today, James? You're also an introvert.
Yes.
And you very much need your own space, your own time, and with a fair amount of, kind of anxiety, social anxiety thrown in there, it means that we have to be really careful about where we go and what we do, and how that kind of affects your mental health, and etc.
Yeah, it's most pronounced, isn't it, if we go to family when you could.
Yeah.
If we went to a party or we went to a family event and you are getting, or any social event, you become more and more hyped and like, what should we do? Should we go here? Should we go out with the... And I'm getting more and more drained as the...
Yeah.
And not that I don't like people, but the way that a social interaction affects the two of us is literally the opposite. And so it's had to be a learning curve, hasn't it? That sometimes I have to say, I need to go home now. Like I'm done. I need to go home. But equally needing time to decompress when I come home from work. You can't just start talking to me. If I've been out with people all day and then I come through and the kids want to talk to me and you want to talk to me, it's like I can't do that.
Yeah.
But even down to like parenting, just so much stuff. When you are opposite and when you would deal with things in an opposite way, it makes it quite interesting.
Yeah.
Because we would approach things very differently. But also I think that it's also, like you say, it's one of our strengths. But I think when we first got together, we were quite young, and we were very extreme versions of who we were.
Yeah.
And I think over time, some of our more extreme personality traits have softened, and we've kind of come together, but we moved more towards each other.
Well, I mean, I really hope we're together.
Not like physically.
Yeah. No, I mean, I hope I haven't sounded too negative there.
No, I'm just saying what I think we complement each other as well. So where one of us has a weakness, the other one tends to fill that because of us being opposite. So like you said, although it can be something that we have to think about, and it can be something that it's taken us time to learn how to be married and how to be together, it also does have the flip side, which is that it's a compliment. You know, if we have to go to a social event, I can rely on James to be the one driving the conversation, and I don't have to worry about having to talk about stuff. James knows that if we have to be somewhere, if there's an appointment, or I will make sure that we get there, because it also works in a positive way as well. Yeah. But it does make me laugh because people always say, oh, you seem really similar, and it's like we're so not. No. We're so not similar. And we like I say, we have a very similar sense of humour. Yes. We finish each other's sentences.
Oh, sorry. Carry on.
That's such a dad joke. We do things, and I think this might just be from living together for so long, but we do stuff at the same time. So we will start singing the same line of a song or something like that at the exact same time. Yeah. Which is always really weird. Yeah. But yeah, we're not very similar at all. No.
I think that
it's interesting.
Yeah, we've had in the past, and we regularly do have blazing arguments, don't we? Like, we're not. When I hear couples say, "Oh yeah, we've been together for 5 years, not had an argument yet," and we're just like, I think we were arguing probably on the first date. But it's one of the things I love about Jess is a fire and a passion, and how
she loves a good argument.
Every little thing, you care about every little thing, and you know, this is a relationship that we've had to work hard for, and you know, I think that we hopefully are living in the rewards of that, in that, like you said, we do complement each other, and you drive us forward, and you help us to be a better version of ourselves, and hopefully I, you know, mellow you out a little bit and help to direct that passion to where it needs to be, and not into things that aren't, you know, so important. And it's something that we've worked hard for. But Jess, I love you very much, and
I'm feeling the love right now.
Yeah, so yeah, that's it basically.
So yeah, in answer to the question, yes and no, but mostly no. Mostly we're not similar, and as I say, I think it can have its pros and its cons. We'd never want to give off this image that everything is perfect and hunky-dory, and that we're just everything's brilliant, because it just is life. Stuff goes wrong, stuff goes well, we get on, we don't get on. Sometimes I don't want to talk to this face.
I struggle to understand why that is, but carry on.
So yeah, hopefully that answers that question, and I think that is it. I think this video is probably 3 times as long as the last one, and I think 90% of it is going to be about our good friend Brandon. It's not necessarily a bad thing, we've got it out of the way. But yeah, so hopefully you enjoyed that. Thank you very much for watching. As always, leave us a comment, like and subscribe if you aren't already. If you've got any questions that you want us to answer, DM me or leave a comment, and we'll do our best to answer them, but for now, thanks for watching and we will see you next month.
Thanks, bye bye.